Wano is one big disappointment. I've tried time and time again to write a script for this video and it just hasn't been working all too well. This arc is too long and there are too many thoughts I have to let out about it. There's also the fact that I'm just fighting a losing battle no matter what my opinion on this arc is. A lot of people have voiced distaste towards Wano and have gotten their asses bombed because of it. Pause. Not only that, but I'm just sick of this arc as a whole. Like, I'm dead serious when I say I'm more relieved about the fact that this mess of an arc is finally over than I was when Luffy actually beat Kaido. And that's gonna speak volumes about how I feel about that fight as well. Trust me, you'll see. Obviously, I don't think this is like the worst arc to ever be written as well. There are plenty of things I still enjoyed about it. When you look at my previous Wano reviews, I'm speaking a lot of positives about certain moments in the arc, and I was really trying to do that. There were many moments I really enjoyed from this arc, and those moments alone made me really want to put this arc as my favorite in the series. But with that being said, I'm not reviewing the moments of this arc, I'm reviewing the arc as a whole. If you have a problem with me not giving Wano a 10 because of the high peaks it had, then I don't know what to tell you. This isn't the place for you. If you think Wano's like the best thing ever written, then you should probably not watch this video because I'm just gonna be shitting on your fun the whole time. While this arc isn't like the worst thing to ever happen, it's certainly not a great one either in my opinion. Rereading this arc was supposedly supposed to make my experience of it better, but it did the exact opposite. If you watched my Act 2 review, you know I felt way worse about it on reread than I did reading it weekly because of how much buildup in that section of the arc ended up underwhelming me or just ended up going nowhere as a whole. Rereading Act 3 as a whole just makes it even worse to me as well. So if you like this arc, that's fine. We can agree to disagree. I'm not making this video to change anyone's mind or tell anyone how to think. I'm only voicing my own opinions here. Dislike the video, call me a dumbass, do whatever you want. I don't really care. I'm not gonna be the person to comfort you because someone on Twitter told you the arc is mid. If there were only a few words I could use to describe the Wano arc as a whole, it would be great ideas, poor execution. And that's the best way I can summarize Wano. While reading, you can obviously tell that Oda had an idea of what he wanted to do with Wano, considering it's one of the arcs he had been looking forward to the most. It was the most built up arc in the entire series. We've spent pretty much all of this story since the time skip building up to this point. We've been in the Law Alliance for literally a decade now, and the result of it was not worth it at all. It was far more disappointing than I ever thought it could have been. I'm gonna try to explain all of my problems in the best way I can. This is also just a review of the raid as a whole, as I've already gone over anything else, so I will not be covering anything before Act 3. Before I do that though, let me list off some things I did like about the arc, because I don't want to be like the party pooper here. I loved the Odin flashback. I think it was really well done. It was beautiful. I loved all the lore that we got through it. I liked Sanji's little character arc in this arc, even if it was a bit iffy in certain moments. Some of the action panels are some of the best Oda has ever drawn, and I think Wano as a whole has some very good moments among the top in the series. Is that it? Yeah, that's pretty much everything. That's everything I like about this arc. I mean, I like the setup, but you know, that was fucking wasted. To start off with one of my smaller issues that still play a big part into why I felt less emotions during this part of the story. I think overall leaving the people of Wano oblivious to the troubles going on was a strange decision. Say whatever you want about whatever themes make this make sense, I just don't like it as a writing decision. One thing I liked about Wano in the first two acts was how the people of the island were involved and shown throughout the entire arc. You saw all their suffering through the Straw Hats' point of views and wanted to see them happy desperately. You saw the characters that we know and love build real connections with simple background characters. You feel for all of them and want to see them rejoice from the defeat of Kaido. One of the best parts of One Piece climaxes is seeing everyone rejoicing after seeing Luffy defeat the bad guy, while also wondering if everything really did just happen. But that doesn't really happen this arc, at least not in the same way it does in other ones. The people don't know at all what's going on and they're just celebrating while the battle is going on. As soon as that celebration ends, everyone shows up perfectly okay and they're just like, oh guys, look, we won. Let's throw another party. Like, oh, okay. Imagine if in Star Wars, everyone at the Rebel base had no idea what was going on and had a party with Princess Leia while Han and Luke blew up the Death Star by themselves came back and was like, hey, yeah, we just saved you guys, and then yet another party was thrown in celebration. Doesn't sound as fun as what we actually got, right? No, it doesn't. Call that a nitpick, I don't care. I mentioned this in my last video, but there are just way too many characters in this arc. I don't know why mangaka always think more equals better, but it's not true. Please stop doing that. The messiest arcs in manga are the ones with just like a shitload of characters going everywhere all at the same time, taking up hundreds of chapters that only actually amount to like 20 minutes of real time in their world. This isn't really any different in this arc, like not at all. It's one of the biggest culprits of this actually. With all the characters involved in the alliance, that meant we had so many subplots to jump towards every single chapter, and not a lot of them actually got to shine. A lot of them were off screen, and a lot of them were just glossed over. This didn't start off as that big of a problem because the groups were bunched up together a lot more. All the Scabbards were together, the Straw Hats were grouped up for the most part. The Scabbards were then taken out of the picture and the Supernova fought the Yonko. It was going just okay at first. But once the Scabbards got up, Kanjuro and Orochi came back and the Supernova separated, and as well as other people coming to Onigashima for some reason, it got all messy. The Scabbards simply overstayed their welcome in this arc. Having them fail and be taken out by Kaido, followed along with Luffy carrying the burden of stopping Kaido himself with his promise to Kinemon, would have been just fine to cap off their involvement here. But instead, we decided to bring them back up, have them split up, meaning we had to jump to them a bunch more times, and reduce them to fighting fodder and characters that had also overstayed their welcomes. And that simply made this arc messy, and I still don't see what the point of it was. The weirdest thing to me in the world was how the same characters that expressed how Kaido was the real problem this whole time, and that defeating Orochi was never the true purpose of this battle, are the same characters that are given the egregious task to take down Orochi for the rest of the fucking raid. Bringing back Kanjuro made for an interesting twist at first, but what we got out of it simply wasn't justified, especially with how fucking long it went. Not off-screening his quote-unquote emotional battle with Kiku at the beginning would have wrapped his plotline up just fine, and made it to where you didn't need to force him back into the story for another subplot for development that nobody was interested in after the chapter was introduced. You could have gotten through that a lot earlier, but instead you decided to drag that on to the end of the damn arc. That's the case for a lot of subplots in this raid. They start off well, but then everything afterwards is nowhere near as interesting and doesn't justify its presence or its length. It just starts interrupting everything that we actually want to see and starts messing up the tension of those moments because of the fact that they're just interrupting it every single time. Having the Scabbards doing all this stuff added literally nothing to their already lackluster characters, and it only hurts them if anything. People told me they had to be involved to the end because they're quote-unquote main cast members this arc, and if that's the case, then they have to be the worst main cast I've ever seen. Neko and Inu were alright, I guess. I had no problems with them fighting Jack again, even though my point about Kiku and Kanjuro applies to that as well, but everyone else, no. Kiku was basically made to be like a body bag the whole raid. Oda pretty much used her to tell the audience, hey guys, I'm not messing around here, people really could die this arc, then follows up by having her be completely fine by the end of things. Oh wait, no, she lost an arm. I guess that's enough, I guess. The biggest example of this though is Kinemon. Oda drew out this beautiful, tense, and scary moment for Kaido, hitting him on the fucking skull with a Thunder Bagua attack, possibly killing Kinemon. Wait, nope, he's perfectly okay too. Who would have guessed? Who would have fucking guessed? The even worse part about this Kinemon fake out isn't even the fact that he didn't die, but because it was shown that he was okay during the raid, right after he was knocked out, and the reasoning for it was so stupid, forced, and pulled straight out of the a-hole. If Oda wanted to make Kinemon turn out to be alive by the end of it, it would have been better to wait until the end of this arc to do that, because the tension built from this moment wouldn't have dusted away because of that, and it wouldn't have ruined the perfectly great moment you gave Kaido as a villain. But showing Kinemon perfectly alive and okay, with the reasoning being, oh, Sanji didn't put my butt back together properly, I'm perfectly okay, is just silly, childish, and dumb. People tried to excuse this by saying he might just die by the end of the arc, but that didn't happen. It honestly ruined his character for me. Giving him a heroic death for the little boy he swore on his life to protect protect is a better outcome for his character arc than the background panels we get from him afterwards. He's not gonna serve a massive purpose in the story after this, so why even do that in the first place? I typically don't care when fake out deaths happen. They can be annoying, but in most cases they don't ruin the story for me. In most cases. This is a different case here though, because it completely undermines and backtracks on such a good moment, and it does it way too quickly. It kills all of the tension that moment built, which by the way was one of the only moments during the raid at this point that had built up any tension. So when I saw this chapter, I immediately thought, oh, okay, so everyone's gonna be fine, huh? It pulled me right out of the story so fast and made me realize that probably nothing crazy was gonna happen to anybody later on. And who would have guessed? I was right that whole time. I didn't expect any major heartbreaking deaths to happen in Wano to begin with, but you're not supposed to confirm that thought to me midway into the arc. I wouldn't be so upset about the Scabbards getting so much content if they were actually like compelling as characters, but for the most part they feel more like tools than actual people. Kawamatsu was given this big honorable introduction, then proceeds to do nothing interesting for the actual battle. The same goes for a lot of these guys too. After their interaction with Kaido, they basically become planks of wood, and that's because they just don't have any real purpose after that point in the raid. Nothing about them is improved upon or changed after they lose to him. It would have been way more poetic to just leave them there, either dying or just surviving afterwards. Everything that happens afterwards with the Scabbards could have been cut out and their characters would have been the exact same, yet far more respectable. Because if you were trying to give them this major purpose this arc, downgrading them from the main villain to all of these lesser villains is not doing the job properly, especially when nothing of significance comes out of it. What makes this even worse is that the two characters that did actually die, Ashura and Izo, were given no attention in this arc. Izo just kinda showed up as soon as the raid started. Ashura just died to fucking TNT while his weaker, less durable companion survived a Conqueror's Bagawa to the goddamn head. And Izo died because... wait, how the fuck did he die again? How did Izo die again? My whole point here is that I'm questioning why you give so much attention and emphasis to fake out moments like this, but will give zero dramatic effect to the two characters that actually died to try and gain just a little bit of tension out of this. I seriously want to know why that is. Why is that, Oda?
On the next Dragon Ball Z!
The amount of unnecessary screen time we get from the Scabbards also takes away from the Straw Hats a lot. You know, the actual main cast of the story, not the Scabbards. Let me just say something here. Sidelining the Scabbards for the Straw Hats would have made nobody upset or annoyed when reading, because not only are they the actual central characters of the story that need to be built on as much as possible as the story progresses, not only are they the main points of interest in the story that people are attached to and come to these chapters to read for, but one thing they do every arc, the whole point of them is to come to these islands and save them, to help them. But they were not doing that. Imagine if instead of Nami, Usopp, and Chopper having their own fights in Alabasta, they were replaced with Koza and Pell doing those fights for them. Not as interesting anymore now, is it? Usopp, Brook, and Nami are reduced to glorified cheerleaders in this arc. Like, it's actually disrespectful. Chopper does like one semi-important thing at the start of the raid, then just sits on the sidelines doing usual doctor things, which I mean, is fine for Chopper, I guess. Robin, Frankie, and Jinbei get in like one fight for like a chapter each and then just disappear entirely afterwards. I did like the Robin fight and what it did for both her and Sanji, I will say, but the way Oda wrote them in this raid was pretty much like, okay, I gave them one thing and one thing only to do. Now I don't have to give them anything else to do for the next 50 chapters. Then proceeded to keep making Scabbards content. For most of the arc, they treat it as if they're less significant to the raid succeeding than people like the Scabbards when they should be at the forefront. This is their alliance. After all, most of this arc should have been focusing on them, especially since this is the first arc we've seen them together in since the beginning of Dressrosa. This is the first arc with the full Straw Hat crew we get in like 300 chapters. Since like 2016, Raizo versus fucking Fukurokuju was put at the tail end of this arc as if it were this big climactic moment we've been waiting for all 100 plus chapters of Wano. We were cutting away from Gear 5 Luffy versus Kaido to this fucking fight. Denjiro, who just disappeared for 50 chapters, then comes in and kills Orochi at the very end of Wano because we just need this to happen at the same time Luffy beats Kaido, because parallels, guys. Parallels. Fucking dog shit characters, man. I've ranted enough about the Scabbards now. I almost forgot that the Minks even existed in this arc because they just did nothing. Carrot was a character that had Straw Hat potential, but that was killed when all this dumb shit involving her happened in the raid. Her whole character just confuses me at this point, especially at the end, because it just doesn't work. They aren't major players. I don't think anyone cares about them anymore, so I'm just gonna move on. The Beast Pirates were also underwhelming villains this arc. One Piece doesn't usually have the greatest villain casts. There are some really good main villains, but like the people around them are usually just there. I mean, there's a few exceptions, but that's usually how it goes. Unironically, the most compelling one was Queen, and that was only because he at least had some personality to him. The Toby Roppo were kind of just there for the sole purpose of giving the Straw Hats a reason to exist in Onigashima. The biggest disappointment of them all, though, is King. He has no personality to him, and he's just a big guy who exists to be quiet and strong. This wouldn't be an issue to him if he was actually like present doing a lot of stuff, but he really wasn't. Before fighting Zoro, the only thing he does is like get into a little squabble with Sanji and then get his fucking ass kicked by Marco. But oh, he wasn't trying in that fight, so it doesn't count. Okay, then he only did fucking one thing this arc. This also wouldn't be an issue if Oda didn't signal more being present for his character. I thought his background of being like the last Lunarian was interesting, but we get no real exploration of that, no backstory or anything. We get like a few glimpses into his relationship with Kaido, but it's not really enough for me to think of King as just another checkpoint for Zoro and nothing more than that, which sucks because there was a lot of potential for King, even though most of the hype was just because we knew Zoro was gonna fight him, and not because we were actually excited to see him. And while we're on the topic of Zoro, he was just underwhelming this arc. Yes, I know he got a bunch of feats. I know he cut Kaido. I'm not talking about power scaling. Please keep that shit away from here. Go back to Seth the Programmer with that shit. It felt like there was going to be something different done with his character this arc from what we've seen so far after all the relationships and connections he was building with the land and people of Wano. And that doesn't happen. It doesn't. We go right back to the same thing Zoro does every single arc. The King of Hell moment was like, guess cool and all, but it wasn't enough for what I thought was being built up. And no, I don't mean killing Kaido. I didn't think he was gonna kill him. Don't even try to bring that up to me. His fight with King as a whole just felt really rushed. He learned he has Conqueror's Haki like a few minutes ago, and just through one battle he can now use the advanced coding that Luffy wasn't even aware about for 2 years after training with Conquerors. Like really? Such a convenient occurrence, man. Makes all the sense in the world. How did he learn it so quickly?
On the next Dragon Ball Z!
While we're on the topic of shitty fights and shitty villains, I don't like Law and Kid versus Big Mom at all. Team fights in general for One Piece just aren't done as well as the 1v1 fights, which already have their own flaws. And when it's between characters that have literally no history between each other, it makes me even less interested. This tiny piece of dialogue from Kid doesn't justify it whatsoever when we get no glimpse into what happened between him and Big Mom's crew, and we never even know if it was a big deal or not because Kid doesn't act like it was. And Law has even less of a purpose to do this. He has no history with Big Mom at all. I'm pretty sure this is like his first time ever fucking meeting her. He is even less needing of character progression as Kid is, and yet he still outshines him in this fight. Kid needed this way more than Law did, and yet he still felt overshadowed by a character that is just way more loved than he is. Like, I don't really get what the point of making them fight together was if you were trying to build Kid up. When it comes to characters that were fumbled, I definitely think Kid has to be near the top of that list. He's supposed to be this rival to Luffy, yet he needs someone arguably stronger than him to beat an emperor on the same level as another emperor that Luffy can beat on his own. Not to mention their whole awakening things were handled awfully. Like, I will die on the hill that these two were fucking asspulls. You can't convince me otherwise. I don't care. You use your trump cards this late into a fight against a character that is way stronger than you, and you know is way stronger than you, when it really would have come in handy when you were all together against two people that could have easily killed all of you. Why didn't you use this in those moments where you were close to fucking dying? When did Law even get an awakening in the first place? When was he ever able to train with it when he refrained from any action motivation since going to Wano. If he's always had this, why didn't he use it against Dofi? Too many questions that aren't answered. Kid is more excusable because we don't know what he's gone through, but I stand my ground on what I've previously said. Killer is handled far better than Kid is, and that's really sad when his biggest moment was meant to set up his captain. Yet another complete missed opportunity here. We're probably not gonna see either of these two for a while in the story, which I'm somewhat relieved that we won't see Law for a while, even though he's one of my favorite characters. He's been in here for too long, just too long. Kid on the other hand, What makes this fight even worse to me though is just Big Mom as a whole. I already ranted about her in my Act 2 review, but when I said she has to be one of the most poorly handled and overall worst characters and villains in the series, I stand by that. This arc completely ruins what could have been a great villain after what we saw in Whole Cake. There was nothing deep or complex about her character, but there didn't need to be. As long as she was consistently threatening in the story, it didn't matter because she was just supposed to be this big monster that was unstoppable, that made you terrified. But that wasn't at all the case in this arc. This arc completely throws that out the window. In the rooftop, she's a support fighter and she acts like an idiot against Kid and Law. You mean to tell me that her own first commander has an awakening, but she doesn't? Why didn't she use the Conqueror's coding at all against Law and Kid when she clearly had that power? Why is she so fucking stupid? Why does her intelligence in battle change when Oda needs it to? Her crew literally does nothing for the entirety of Onigashima, and she's just a bumbling idiot the entire time that only exists here for the sole purpose of giving Law and Kid something to do when the rooftop fight concludes. She's a terrible villain, a terrible character, and her presence in this arc is entirely pointless. She's a Yonko that gets treated like a fucking gag throughout the entire arc, and her closeout is laughably forced and underwhelming. I don't know what Oda was going for when it came to her, but it definitely didn't work at all. She's a fucking joke. I'm gonna get Yamato out of the way quick because I just don't care enough to give her some long segment, especially since she's not joining the crew. If you really thought she was compelling enough to be a Straw Hat, at least half of that is definitely because you were horny. There was nowhere near enough attention, progress, elaboration, or purpose given to her this arc that would have justified her being a crew member. That would have been sustainable enough for the rest of the story. The Odin gag should have died at the end of the raid, especially since she was protecting his own fucking son. It's not funny. Like, it wasn't at all. It was annoying. She's another character with really wasted potential. I actually really liked her at first, but then she kind of just went nowhere. But it's whatever, I guess. Moving on. So now that all of those segments are all out of the way, it's time to get into my biggest criticism of all, and that is actually two things in one: the final fight and Kaido as a whole. Now, this final fight started out incredibly strong but fell into like a really repetitive structure. The same cliffhangers being used multiple chapters in a row, making it predictable. Kaido giving Luffy whatever power-up he could ever dream of. Kaido knocking Luffy down, nothing particularly groundbreaking happening between those matches, and then Luffy coming back perfectly okay and even stronger than before because he's the main character. And before anyone says anything, I love the concept of Gear 5 as well as the design, but the execution of the reveal could have been a lot better. This has nothing to do with themes or whatever fucking writing devices you learned yesterday. Luffy got back up right after Kaido quote-unquote killed him. Like, we knew he wasn't dead, but more time should have been spent between those moments because it felt like Oda was really rushing to get to the climax. He could have either had Kaido doing some really good stuff as a villain, like threatening the crew, the people downstairs, or gave a glimpse into an actual backstory. That doesn't happen. And not to mention, the power-up was really just convenient as hell, and it's Luffy's third different power-up this arc, and second in this fight alone. Like, goddamn, man. While I enjoy the idea of Gear 5, I do think the more silly aspects were overused when we actually saw it fighting. This is really just a thing with me. I understand if you think differently, but with the already little tension and personal weight this fight had, when I saw Luffy using Kaido like a jump rope and Law's eyes popping out of his head, you know, a pretty serious character, I really stopped taking this fight seriously. That's really just me though. I guess you think differently about this, then that's fine. I get it. I know One Piece does get silly at times even when in serious moments, but it being this central and present in the last act of their battle just seems like an interesting idea that's best left on the cutting board. I just don't think it worked here, even though it worked in other places. And yes, I know all about the themes and parallels of Joy Boy, the sun god, the theme of freedom, and how it perfectly represents Luffy's character. Please save your essays. All I'm saying is the execution could have been way better here. Has nothing to do with themes, just execution. Kaido was already feeling lackluster, and seeing him being treated like a wacky, wavy, inflatable arm flailing tube man just made me take him even less seriously than I already did. So, let's talk about Kaido now. Kaido perfectly encapsulates every problem I have with this arc. Really good ideas, wasted potential, horrible writing, and horrible execution. I don't need to express why his backstory was absolutely fucking awful, but I am, however, going to explain why all the excuses for this bullshit is as stupid as it is. For one, stop saying to wait for Rox's flashback. That is not going to fix any of the disappointment left with Kaido's character. It is not at all going to change any of the distaste of this arc to see Kaido getting a bit of content down the line as a side character in another character's flashback years after the interest for him has already gone and after he was already written out of the story. Oh look guys, another parallel. Isn't that just great writing? Parallels! There also seems to be another group of people online that think Kaido is already an amazing antagonist and doesn't need a backstory for his character, but I disagree entirely. Kaido is a character whose most interesting aspect is what we don't know about him yet. What we know about him from when he's introduced is pretty much all we know about him after hundreds of chapters later. There are hints sprinkled around here and there that hint at a deeper, more complex character. Emphasis on the word hint, because none of that is expanded upon, none of that is elaborated, and none of it is given any explanation. All the questions about his motivation, his depression, his aspirations, and why he is the way he is has received less than surface level exploration throughout the entirety of Wano, and all of it not coming full circle ends up making Kaido look like some typical mustache twirling villain because he acts like that for half of the arc. And it would be perfectly fine if he was this meat-headed villain too. It would be fine if Kaido was just a basic strong guy that had nothing more to him if Oda committed to that. But he didn't. He added so much cryptic dialogue and panels that were made to make you think otherwise. But his backstory literally only helps the claim that his only character trait is being strong, because nothing else about him is given any sort of depth or detail. The things you will see all the straw man analyze on Twitter or wherever else they do isn't at all what you would get when reading the actual manga. They'll tell you to read, but when you do read, you receive nothing, both weekly and in binge. It annoys me when people bring up Crocodile as a comparison when countering why people don't like Kaido, when Crocodile was never meant to be anything more than what he actually was. He didn't need a backstory because his history didn't matter. All that matters was what was going on right now, because Oda never put any emphasis on what happened with Crocodile before this. With Kaido it's different, because you're meant to question his past. He's someone from an earlier generation with loads of experiences of loss, victory, and troubles, and yet we get to see none of that in this arc, or even any, just any mention of it. All we get are little flashes and hints, but no exploration once again, and this is when he's the most central to the plot. But I guess that's all excusable because we might, keyword, might, see him show up in Rox's flashback after he was already given the most underwhelming defeat and death of any character in the story. There is no reason why you should be so unable to write characters dying outside of Whitebeard and Ace that he can't even kill the main villain off without making it look like it doesn't matter. People who act like Kaido is on the same tier as Doflamingo are fucking hilarious. Doflamingo was a perfect antagonist and foil even without a backstory. That backstory was only a cherry on top for Dofi when you already had a full fucking ice cream. As for Kaido, you just got the fucking melted remains. He's a mediocre, underdeveloped, and underwhelming antagonist that wasn't at all worth waiting half the series for. And if you think we should be waiting more time to see any depth added to his character, then I don't know what to fucking tell you, man. World's strongest creature, my ass. The most threatening thing he did all arc long was completely ruined by Kinemon's farting ass running around Onigashima. He is the perfect example of poor ass execution, because while there were clearly more in store that Oda wanted to show for Kaido, we didn't get to see the majority of it. We got crumbs of what his character could have been, but never the full thing. Kaido is the perfect example of a character who's way better in concept than he is in what we got of him. As I said before, you can think of all these deep, complex narratives to put behind a character, but when your writing is literally contradicting or not supporting those ideas or giving any full elaboration on, all those themes go straight down the drain. Execution is the most important part of storytelling because no matter how good the idea is, it goes straight to shit when you can't handle it properly. That's how Wano felt to me. The entire arc had great foundations laid down for it, but it all fell apart when we got to the actual climax because of poor writing decisions, poor plot threads that felt like chores to read through, wasted character potential, and just a messy structure overall with plot threads that were never even wrapped up. There were some cool reveals in the epilogue, but even a lot of shit in that doesn't really make that much sense when you really think about it. It felt like Oda really wanted to get out of this arc already, and I don't really blame him. I was sick and tired of Wano for a while, and I just wasn't looking forward to anything involving this arc anymore. I don't like its characters. I don't like its villains. The ideas of the battles we got were way better than what was actually shown, and this arc was just one big disappointment to me. And I say this all as a fan of One Piece and a lover of storytelling in general. I am disappointed. I don't think I've ever been more disappointed reading an arc before than I had when reading this one. This doesn't make me worried about the final saga really, but I still feel let down because this arc could have been the best arc in the series for me. But I don't even have it in my top 5. Hell, y'all don't even know where I would rank Wano in my arcs list. I'd get crucified for that definitely. Rereading it only made it worse. So don't tell me to reread. I've reread it 3 times. That is more than enough. There's so much else I could critique, like everything involving this Carrot as the Minx leader, because that's apparently Pedro's will, even though that doesn't make any fucking sense. I could rant about Hawkins and X-Drake being fucking lame, but I already did that, so who cares? Momonosuke's character arc is extremely half-assed and so many other things are as well, but I'm tired of this arc already, and you're probably all tired of hearing me complain, so I'm just gonna finish this off here. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I am rambling on now, I can't even fucking talk right. Bye bye.